It's the biggest game of the season. Well, it's the second game of the season, but we'll tell you all the keys you need to know as the Ole Miss Rebels travel down to New Orleans to take on the Tulane Green Wave. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast on and on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Just want to let you know the Rebels play the Tulane Green Wave Saturday at 2:30 Central Time. We get to see a competition between Jackson Dart and Michael Pratt play out on the gridiron. Catch every play on the Rebels hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on channel 190 or on the SXM app. Search Ole Miss Rebels. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, and this is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and I am pretty excited. This is our Keys to the Week episode. We're finally going to start jumping into Tulane and what we need to look for. And the number one thing that Ole Miss fans need to look for, I just need to say, today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege or enter promo code LockedOnCollege for a free water bottle with any purchase. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you. So we need to talk about the Tulane Green Wave. I got so excited, I jumped ahead of myself a little bit there for a second. So Ole Miss is in a unique position where they had an extremely good performance against a team that sometimes they struggle against, historically, Ole Miss. And now they get to go to the next level, which would be the Tulane Green Wave, who they're ranked, I think, 24th in the country, and they played USA over the weekend. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. The leader of this team, this is an unequivocal alpha in Michael Pratt. He is the leader of that program. If something happens to Michael Pratt, they go from a 10-win team to like a 6-win team. And that isn't an insult towards Tulane. That's honestly a compliment of how special Michael Pratt is. He is a really, really good quarterback. And if you look at what they did in the game, they pulled away for a 37-17 win over South Alabama. South Alabama, remember, they're no slouch. They won 10 games last year with losses to UCLA and Troy as the only two. Michael Pratt passed for 294 yards and 4 touchdowns as the number 24 Tulane Green Wave defeated South Alabama 37-17 in the non-conference season opener for both teams Saturday night in New Orleans. Pratt completed 14 of 15 passes and increased his career touchdown pass total to 72, tying Patrick Ramsey's Green Wave record. Jaquan Jackson caught 2 of the touchdown passes from 47 and 48. He also had another receiver with a long touchdown pass as well. So out of the 14 completions, 3 of them were about 50 yards and 4 touchdowns. So you can knock the passing yards down quite a bit. And this is important for this reason. Michael Pratt's a good quarterback. Tulane ran a total of like 52 plays in this game. South Alabama ran a total of about 53, and that might be reversed. I apologize if that is the wrong information there. But the point of this is that we're not dealing with tempo programs here. We are not. So this is what you need to do against Michael Pratt. Eliminate explosive plays and let your defensive line cook. Let them get pressure on the quarterback. Tulane is going to make plays, but eliminate the explosive plays. Make them have to drive the ball down the field. They did not run the ball particularly effective against USA in the opening game. If you look at the stats for the game, they had 436 yards of offense, but like I said, 150 yards passing came on 3 pass plays. That's 294 yards. So roughly cut the passing yardage down in half. Other than those 3 plays, they ran for about a total of about 300 yards total offense. If you eliminate those explosives. Now, there's speed on the outside, the way Tulane runs their offense. Willie Fritz is a really good coach. To do what he has done at Tulane is commendable. Really good coach. And I honestly enjoy seeing Tulane do well. They would be my other SEC team if they were still in the league. Heck, I own Tulane merch. I like Tulane. So it kind of pains me a little bit to think of, but they did not run the ball particularly well. Now, they won 10 games last year, and everybody has been talking about, hey, let's transitive property, take a data point, and move that all the way into the future, that they were going to win 10 games again. And they lost their all-world running back, Tyjae Spears. Tulane is a difficult out when Tulane was running the ball like they were last year. Tyjae Spears was doing all kinds of versatile things that made him an extremely dangerous football player. Well, he is gone. And I think Tulane ran for somewhere in the neighborhood of 130, 140 yards. Now, Kane Womack and USA, good defensive team. This is a 10-win Sun Belt team that they played against. Good team. I like Carter Bradley at quarterback. I like a lot of stuff about the USA Jaguars. But if we're being real about it, if you play clean and do what you're supposed to do, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. If Ole Miss plays clean and eliminates explosive plays, I don't know if Tulane can beat them. I just think there's too many athletes. Ole Miss is too deep. It's going to be 96 degrees. The temperature on the turf will probably be 110, 120. I think that is going to be interesting. And we're going to talk about all of that, the stuff that Ole Miss needs to do internally in the third segment. But if you look at these numbers, Pratt, 14 of 15, 294 yards, 4 touchdown passes. Like I said, there were some long ones in there, but he was very efficient. The rest of the time they ran the football. They ran it 35 times for like 136 yards. So they averaged right at about 4 yards a carry, I do believe. Now, their defense, if you look at their defensive situation, they held USA to about 265 yards. They turned USA over 5 times. Time of possession was about the same. That doesn't really matter. First downs, USA had 18. Tulane only had 16 first downs in their game against the South Alabama Jaguars. Really interesting stuff. I mean, Tulane played a good football team. They are a well-coached unit, period. But if you look at this, if you take away the explosive plays from Michael Pratt, if you just take those away to where Michael Pratt is forced to drive the field against you with your athletes, what really is there to be afraid of? Like I said, Tulane has some burners on the outside, and they're going to try to hit their deep shots. The safeties better be able to run. They better be able to play. The secondary is going to be tested. And if you've heard any of my show over the last 2 months, the room I was most concerned with on Ole Miss's team is the safety room. This game, with the speed of Tulane, has a chance to get a little bit hairy for Ole Miss. This is a way that Michael Pratt can cook against Ole Miss. Deep passes, explosive passes, trying to take advantage of the safety position. Now, here's the other flip side of that could absolutely happen. Tulane is a pretty good team in the trenches, both offensive and defensive line. But should Ole Miss, with their superior SEC defensive linemen, and say Xavion Harris and J.J. Pegues and Cedric Johnson, those guys can cook to the point where Tulane just can't block them. If they kind of look like LSU did against Florida State, if that's what it looks like from the beginning, Michael Pratt's in a little bit of trouble because that front four is going to hunt. And that is going to lead to turnovers because Ole Miss on the back end, they have cornerbacks playing basically all of the back five. So there's players all over that can run. And Dejon Anthony got an interception last week against Mercer. So we'll see. Historically, in a situation like this with kind of a running clock, the team that is significantly less talented decides to run that clock. So we're going to talk about one very, very important position that is the defensive line and the offensive line in the second segment and how they are absolute keys for Ole Miss moving forward. And it's because of that. If Tulane wants to run the ball and Ole Miss can't stop the run, that is going to allow Tulane to run the clock. and make the game shorter, and the Ole Miss offense is going to be a little bit less effective. And Ole Miss's offense scores so fast, if that happens, and Ole Miss has a couple of 3 and outs, all of a sudden the defense can wear down a little bit. So this is probably the pathway that Ole Miss needs to watch out for. Now, I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Bird Dogs. And you know what? Bird Dogs make you look good. And everybody knows my story, right? I had brain surgery in 2019. And because of that, I lost half of my balance in my body. My days of playing pickup basketball is essentially over. Heck, my days of riding a four-wheeler is essentially over. The way I don't get wobbly is I walk all the time. 2 or 3 times a day, I am out walking. And I have been looking for the perfect pair of shorts to make that work. And I've found it with Bird Dogs. The stuff that they sent us from Bird Dogs, I love to go out on my walks in that stuff. They have stretch khaki material, right? And they're designed to fit slimmer through your thigh and leg, giving you that sculpted look, which, you know, I've been married for 20 years, but it's always kind of nice to know it's like, hey, my legs look good. But Bird Dogs fixed this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric that looks just like khaki but stretches. So you get that slimmer fit and it doesn't sacrifice movement, so you can walk and do all the stuff that you want to do. They have anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that helps you keep you cool and dry all day long. That's awesome when I live in Central Florida, going out there trying to walk during the course of a summer. And they're functional for any occasion: golf, date, evening, going to the pool, working out, lounging, going to a theme park. It's absolutely fantastic. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code lockedoncollege to get a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. The free gifts are pretty cool. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You will not want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise. And I guarantee you, if you get a pair of Bird Dogs, you will be in my comment section telling me how right I am. College football season is here, and this season, Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insights and analysis from our stable of Locked On hosts covering every team. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. It's going to air on our channel as well. So that is pretty awesome. So the trenches, which this is one of the most important parts of this game, but you can't really lead with trench work because for whatever reason, it doesn't get the listens that the quarterbacks do. Quarterbacks leads. It's kind of like the journalism adage, if it bleeds, it leads. Michael Pratt's the story of this game because people watch quarterbacks. It's just the way it is. But the trench play is going to be mighty important in this game. And offensively, if you look exactly what they said, John Garrison had a really good game in the first game of the season. Ole Miss's offensive line has been dealing with injuries throughout fall camp, so Kiffin has been rotating players in different spots to get a better idea who fits where. The shuffling on the offensive line continued on Saturday as former transfers Victor Kern and Quincy McGee both started the game at left tackle and left guard in place of Jaden Williams and Eli Acker, respectively. Williams later saw snaps at left tackle, and Snedrick Melton replaced right tackle Michael Pettis at the halfway point. Caleb Bourne started the game at center for the Rebels, but was replaced by Reese McIntyre at halftime. So that's from the Grove Report. One interesting thing, the offensive line looked completely different than it did last year. And I get everybody's going to say, yes, it was Mercer. But even against Central Arkansas, it didn't look like this last year. If you want to go apples to apple, it didn't look like this last year as well. The offensive line did a really good job blocking, fighting, doing the things that they knew to do on the front. And this offensive line is going to be tested even a little bit more because Tulane has a good front. Now, I don't know about Georgia Tech's front. So this might be the best defensive front that Ole Miss is going to see from the non-conference this year. So we'll see exactly how that looks. Will it be another game for Victor Kern at left tackle? Will Jade Williams end up back on the field? Eli Acker, Quincy McGee, they played well. One thing you noticed in the game against Mercer is Jackson Dart could sit back there and read a book. He could. And Bill Flowers, one thing that he wants to see, the over-the-middle field situation was taken care of. We saw that. What Bill Flowers wants to see now is Jackson Dart making quick decisions. And this defensive line is going to force that thinking and that processing a little bit more. And as it gets closer to Alabama, because remember, we are all building towards Alabama, but especially now that LSU is an increasingly winnable game. On the ESPN FBI right now, the probability is Ole Miss at like nearly 60% of winning that football game. So ESPN's FPI was not impressed at the moment from the LSU offense or defense going against FSU. So they're building towards Alabama. This defensive line test is going to be a big deal. Can Jackson Dart process this information quickly? Can he make situations maybe of Caden Priestcorn or the tight end hits? It becomes a factor in the offense as Ole Miss starts to put stuff on tape for Kevin Steele and Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Will be really interesting to see. And that's the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, that's equally important for Ole Miss because the point of this is you need to affect Michael Pratt. Michael Pratt wants to hit you with explosive plays. He was 14 of 15. He only threw the ball 15 times. 3 of them were explosive touchdowns. Maybe more were long gains that I haven't seen the play-by-play, but I do remember those 3 touchdowns on long passes. A lot of that has to do with the fact that you want to give him time to get the ball down the field to these receivers. The Ole Miss defensive line is going to affect that. It'll be interesting to see. Cedric Johnson's dropped into coverage quite a little bit. That was that jack position that Pete Golding set up during the season. Cedric Johnson's going to do that from time to time. You have Jared Ivey, you have Xavion Harris, you have J.J. Pekees potentially. In New Orleans, a lot of rotation happened on that defensive line. A consistent pass rush and the ability to soak up double teams. Let's say that Xavion Harris has to be doubled and J.J. Pekees has to be doubled. That means Jared Ivey and Cedric Johnson are dealing with one-on-ones or running backs or tight ends. That is a win-win type situation, and that is honestly what Pete Golding's going for. So we will pay attention to this game to see if the defensive line is active. They're grabbing double teams. They're forcing the quarterback to be less time-consuming back in the pocket, and there's an urgency to get the ball out of his hand. We'll see. And you have like Zamari Walton, you have Deshaun Gaddy, you have dudes, DeAndre Prince out at the corner position, back deep, John Saunders, real close. Dejon Anthony had a pick against Mercer. Isheem Young, who is still in the back. He's still playing back in the backfield, even though he might be more suited for what Ole Miss was doing a year ago. So we'll see as this defense it gets better as it moves closer towards Alabama. The important thing to realize for both Ole Miss and Tulane as a team usually makes its biggest jump and improvement from game 1 to game 2. So that's something that we can look forward. But the trench play, both Tulane's offensive line versus Ole Miss's defensive line and Ole Miss's offensive line versus Tulane's defensive line is going to go a long way to determining how this game goes. Because I don't think Ole Miss should lose this game. I think this is a game that Ole Miss wins 31-17, 31-14. I think it's going to be a test. Tulane's ranked. They're a good football team. But there are ways that this game can get squirrely, and I'm going to go over that in the next segment and why Ole Miss needs to worry about it. This is a road game in Ullman. It's going to be a different atmosphere than anything that Ole Miss has had going down and playing Tulane. Kansas State, who was in the Sugar Bowl last year, went down to Ullman Stadium and lost. I think it might not have been in Ullman Stadium. It could have been in K-State, but they ended up losing to the Tulane team. So if you're not careful, it can get squirrely and turn sideways on you. And Tulane is absolutely a team that can beat you. If Ole Miss does what they're supposed to do, Tulane will not. But you have to do it. You have to handle what's going on. Anyway, when we come back, we will talk about Ole Miss needing to play clean. against Tulane. If Ole Miss plays clean against Tulane, they're going to win the game, period. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. Right now, I do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets, guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday ticket. That's win-win from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. Ole Miss is currently a 7.5-point road favorite for the game versus the Tulane Green Wave. That's up from 4.5 points just yesterday. This is a perfect bet for a bonus bet. You have a chance to do it. This thing is moving. Catch it before it goes up even higher to where the points get to a point that gets a little bit problematic. I think I'd feel comfortable with everything up to 10 points, but at 7.5, it's getting there. It's getting borderline for me. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and visit and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, it's an official partner of the NFL. The Rebels play the Tulane Green Wave Saturday at 2:30 Central. Trey Harris, Jackson Dart, and the boys will be playing their first road game of the 2023 season, and you can catch every play of the Rebels hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on 190, channel 190, or on the SXM app, searching Ole Miss Rebels. All right. The third key to this game, we talked about Michael Pratt is a major key of this game, and how Ole Miss deals with him and cutting down explosives is going to be a major league important deal for the Ole Miss offense. Trench play for Ole Miss needs to be on point. It didn't have to be last week. This will be our introduction to trench play for Ole Miss. We'll get to see exactly where the offensive line sits. We know where we think it sits. We get to see exactly where it sits. And the defensive line, we saw Xavier Harris absolutely flash against the Mercer Bears. Him and J.J. Pegues and those guys, I think in this game there's a chance you're going to see the defensive line cook a little bit, because that front seven for Ole Miss is pretty salty. Third of all, this is something in a non-conference games and games when Ole Miss is otherwise favored, I'm going to talk about. And Ole Miss needs to play clean. And what I mean by play clean, when you hear me talk about playing clean, and I'll just explain it in this first video of the year, talking about the Tulane Green Wave, playing clean means no operational penalties, no false starts, no delays of games. No jumping offsides, no stuff that you can control. Also, no turnovers. Now, if you look back, I'm going to put this graphic up again. If you look back at the South Alabama versus Tulane game, South Alabama had 5 turnovers. In a game they lost by 3 touchdowns. This is a game where Tulane didn't play particularly clean. This was not a clean, well-played football game. But 5 turnovers, you do not win very often committing 5 turnovers, especially against a team that is well coached defensively like the Tulane Green Waves. Jackson Dart needs to take care of the ball. Spencer Sanders, when he comes in, if he comes in, needs to take care of the ball. Use your weapons outside. Jordan Watkins, fantastic weapon. They're going to be really nervous about Trey Harris. And remember, this is real similar to a home game, a homecoming game for Trey Harris. He's from the Lafayette area, so he's going to be amped to play this football game as well. I want to see Kyron Heath again. He's a guy that made all sorts of plays against Mercer. He showed that he has that look and everything with a tight end. Whenever Caden Priestcorn comes back, that room is going to be very stacked. Hey, and Michael Trigg, if you go back and watch that Mercer game, and I know many people don't want to watch the second half of the Mercer game, Michael Trigg looked involved. He looked involved. He looked there, present. And that is a good first step. Now, we're talking baby steps when it comes to Michael Trigg at this point. But you can even see in that game, whenever he's on, it has a chance to look different. My whole 12 personnel that I want to do, I'm still there. So you give Michael Trigg as much chances as honestly he needs, as long as he isn't being a detriment to your team. you're going to have all the patience in the world with this guy because of what he can do. There's going to be a game this year where Michael Trigg comes up and just looks unbelievable. He looks like the best tight end in college football. And yes, I realize what I just said. So you will see exactly how that goes. If you play clean, that means Michael Trigg plays clean as well. That means Jackson Dart gets everybody in and out of the play, lines up quickly. He does not rush snaps and make sure everybody is lined up. You don't have a situation with Florida where two players wearing the same number are running on the field for the punt team. All of that is eliminated. You do not turn over the football. If you just play football straight up, clean, you beat Tulane. Good football team, but the line has jumped up to 7.5 points. It's probably going to jump up a little more over the next couple of days. This thing might hit 10 by kickoff. And like I said, this isn't an insult towards Tulane. They're a good football team. Michael Pratt is a really good quarterback. And nobody needs to overlook Tulane even a little. But if Ole Miss takes care of business and plays to their potential, Tulane can't beat them. But it's going to come down to turning over the football, penalties. If the game gets sloppy, if it gets messy, if something happens like that, Tulane has a chance to hang around. And once this game gets to the second half, if it gets to the fourth quarter and it's a one-score game, which it absolutely could be, the question about how Ole Miss went through fall camp and the lightness and everything becomes an issue because cramping could be a problem on that turf in a 95-degree weather. This is the game we were worried about with the practice and stuff like that. So we were definitely going to keep an eye on that as well. Should be really good. Hey, before we get out of here, I do want to say welcome aboard to Stuart Still Pickles. Their first reader on the show will be Friday in the Why Ole Miss Wins episode, sponsored by Stuart Still Pickles. And enjoy that. They have a lot of market on the Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana Gulf Coast and that area. Ole Miss is going down to New Orleans. I mean, it makes sense while we're doing this right now, but Stewart's Cajun Dill Pickles, really good. You can catch it at Rouse's Market, so you can get them there, or you can get them at Pickled Store. The link is in the description if you're interested about that. Hook them up, get a jar of pickles delivered and everything. Let them know that advertising on the show is beneficial for them. But it's pretty good. So you can see the logo behind me and everything. But in the course of the week, they'll be on board for at least the next month. They're also the pick sponsor on the SEC After Dark channel as well. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Also, don't forget the Ole Miss hometown broadcast on Sirius Channel 190, and you can catch it on the SXM app searching Ole Miss Rebels. Anyway, we will catch you tomorrow. Hotty toddy.